Hi everyone. Today is 23rd of November, 2021. My name is Marin Jankowski. I'm the Director of Platform Infrastructure. And today we are having a group conversation about the infrastructure department, GitLab.com, and anything that you're interested in infrastructure related. We have a first question from John. John, are you on the call? Do you want to verbalize your question? All right, I'm going to take that as a no, and going to read John's question. Global searches are above the default 1 second, but below the low urgency of 5 second threshold. We feel like 5 seconds is too long, and we're pushing for 1 second, but we're not there yet. What should we do in the meantime? Perhaps a 3 second urgency would be more fitting. This question is related to the error budgets that we are working with product and development department. Rachel provided a response there, but Andrew, you're on the call. Do you want to maybe share what you wrote?
Yeah, I agree with Rachel. It's difficult because we have these categories all set up, and adding more obviously adds more overhead to everyone, and it's more decisions that everyone needs to make about what the right threshold is that they need to select. So I think for now, it's probably, I agree with Rachel that we should just stick with the 5 second. But my question was really on the 5 second threshold, what does the Apdex look like? Is it like 100%, meaning that every request comes in at under 5 seconds, or is it still something below that? But I guess, I don't know if John's on the call. John Mason.
Hi, yeah. Hey, can you hear me?
I can.
All right, sorry. Cool, I always have some connection issues. Yeah, I assume you just voiced my question. Yeah, so right now we're above 1 second, but below 5 seconds. And we feel like if we put it at 5 seconds, we would instantly be at like 100% availability. And so it's a little bit too slow for us. So we wanted to get a sense on what would be the best thing to do in our situation. I think for us, perhaps a 3 second urgency would be more fitting. So, yeah.
So that was kind of my question, was would 5% give you 5 seconds give you 100%? And it sounds like it would. I would say that for the moment, maybe the thing to do, and I was just voicing, I think before you came on, that I tend to agree with Rachel that we don't want too many categories because it puts more overhead on everyone who has to kind of decide which category they fall in. But what you can do is there's a way of constructing an Apdex in Elasticsearch. And what's quite nice about that is that you can take a look at the values, and it's called a percentile ranking query. If you ping me after this, I can help you put one together. And you can effectively, with that, choose a threshold, like 3 seconds or whatever it is, and see what your Apdex would come out as. And that would give you an idea of like how much work it would take to get it down to 1 second or 3 seconds or 5 seconds. It might be a little bit more extra data that might help you. And it's quite nice because you can do it on what you already have.
Okay, perfect. I guess the follow-up question to this would be, what would be better if we kept it at 1, we're going to still be at red, right? Would it be better, since 5 seconds doesn't really fit for us, assuming that isn't a fit, would it be better to stay in red and keep working on improving, kind of overcommit per se? Or should we switch to green and then just make an internal goal of improving the search?
I mean, I think it really depends on what the user experience is like. So when a user experiences like a 5 second or 3 second time to get a response back from the service, is it something that's genuinely frustrating? And so that's something you've got to kind of work with product on deciding, I think. And if that is the case, then you should keep it at 1 second. But if it's something that you can manage, then put it to 5 and then kind of carry on working on it with it green. But I think the thing that should decide that is the experience of users rather than kind of a technical decision, would be my
And
sort of take.
You also run into a point of diminishing returns at some point, right? So even if 1 second is the threshold you want to aim for, like Andrew said, does that actually make an impact? You might be better off building a new feature or something if between
Right.
1 second and 2 seconds, right?
Exactly.
Like if that doesn't actually make any difference to anyone.
And just the kind of point with the SLIs is really kind of the focus always has to be on the user experience. So that's where we should always be driving that question from. And if you think it's good enough, then put it to 5. If you think that it's frustrating for users, then leave it at 1.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John, for asking the question. Really appreciate that, and thanks for thinking about this. It's a really good thing to do, and it's a good practice to have. Eric, do you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, and I'm just kind of taking advantage of the group we have on this call. I figured we could touch base on the S1 incident yesterday. And without getting into all the solutioning and start to troubleshoot here, I know this one has been harder than usual to determine root cause. So I just wonder if you get people's thoughts on the different threads that we're pulling on and why this one has been different and unusual. And then I know rollbacks, like the time it took to make the decision, validating the rollback, all those things were one of the things at stake. So I'm curious to get the team's thought on that. And where we go forward in terms of, automation, decision-making, training, all those aspects of it.
I can speak for that, but Amy, in case you have a ready answer, I would prefer if you do so.
Yeah, so certainly I can talk about rollbacks for this one. So we are practicing them regularly on staging. We're working to find a way to be able to practice them more regularly on production. At the moment, that's harder, so we are a bit reliant on good incidents that fit the needs. This one was a little bit unusual, I think, in 2 reasons. One is that it wasn't necessarily clear, and actually it's still not clear if this was a deployment related issue. So although we can roll back and we're confident on the process of rollbacks, it was unclear whether that was actually going to resolve things. The other one was we don't roll back if there are post-deployment checks. If there are post-deployments included in the package. In this case, there were. So all of our tooling and checks recommend that we don't do a rollback. We were lucky in this case. We had people on the call from the database team who were able to validate these and assure us that it was safe to do. So there are a few extra things. I think the big one, and what we've seen in the past, is the time to decide that a deployment was the cause of the incident is the biggest area that we can improve on.
I mean, when might we adopt a strategy where we consider rolling back without, in the absence of evidence that that was the cause?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly
like what I'm saying is, like, we try turning feature flags on and off, and we don't have to get to positive confirmation that was definitely that thing before we flip it. Is there a point where rollbacks become so easy we could say, like, oh well, let's just try it? I know it's a very heavyweight operation today and high risk, but might we get to a point where we'd feel like, hey, we ruled out some obvious stuff, let's just try a rollback and see if that doesn't address it, without doing like 3 hours of troubleshooting? That's what I'm sort of getting at.
It's one of those things, Eric, where we do need to evaluate the risk, right? Based on what we know about the post-deployment migrations, that introduces a level of risk that we are not comfortable with. Like, even with the practice, we need to realize whether, if we don't know the root cause of the problem already, would a rollback add another level of complexity for us to debug? Do we have to then wonder whether, a rollback caused an issue versus just, the item that we are trying to investigate? So I think the engineers on that call were trying a couple of different alleys, right? Like one of them being turning on feature flags, because we know that's a safe operation. So that was a safe thing to do. Another item in parallel that was happening was vacuuming that was being done on the table. That was also a safe operation to do, and that alley was also explored. And we were basically eliminating item at a time, and that is taking some time to do. But specifically, the post-deployment migrations do introduce a level of risk that we, in general, are not comfortable with. And I can also share like one item just to show that there has been like a significant amount of discussion on the future of post-deployment migrations, because how do you resolve one of those problems? We'll try to eliminate that lack of clarity that we have. So an issue is, I'm going to link it here and I'll add context later, but you can also see like that there is a significant amount of challenges that we need to consider when we are running a post-deployment migration. So I think one of the items that we definitely want to get to is that whenever there is no post-deploy migration, we can automate the rollbacks. But when there is a post-deploy migration, actually create a process which will allow us to invite people who do have the expertise to tell us about the risk they have. And maybe eventually we reduce the risk of post-deployment migrations to the point where we all feel comfortable rolling back immediately, regardless of that possible new problem introduction that a rollback could create.
So two follow-up questions then, and thanks for those thoughts. One is, do we feel like in the future we may be able to tell the difference between a safe and an unsafe post-deployment migrations versus today just painting them all red de facto? And then the second one is there a timing issue with just automated, in an automated way, running a deploy in a non-production environment, doing the rollback and checking the results to see if it was safe? Or does that take so long today that it would prevent us from deploying as frequently as we wanted to? Or, is that incompressible? Is there no way to shrink it down, or we could actually try each one?
Yes. So in terms of whether in the future we'll be able to automatically determine the risk, maybe. It's probably a significant amount of work. What we're going to opt for instead is to separate the post-deployment migrations off the auto deploys. And that gives us a lot more, we're far more likely to have the majority of our packages suitable to roll back, regardless of what the post-deployment migrations. So that will be, that will enable rollbacks on far more of our packages. Yes, being able to run these. One of the things we also lose when we do a rollback, especially on an incident where we don't necessarily know exactly the root cause, is if it resolves something, it's quite difficult to determine like what was the actual cause. So being able to do these on a different environment, if we can reproduce the problem and we can roll it back there, then yes, absolutely, that would speed things up. Rollbacks are quite fast, like end to end, they're around an hour, but it doesn't take, that's as a roll through the servers. So we can see results pretty rapidly on there, and that will get faster in the future. So that would be a good one for us to bring in, Mel.
Okay, so that is on the roadmap.
Yes.
Got it. Thanks. And Andrew, I saw you had some thoughts on my first question. Do you want to? I copy and pasted it up. Do you want to voice that over?
I just wanted to say, like, I haven't been directly involved in resolving this or trying to figure out what the problem is, but it does seem to be a fairly unique issue, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's taking longer to get to a root cause. The type of things that we were seeing, particularly on like the planning side rather than the execution side of queries, kind of really threw off a lot of our other techniques that we use. So, we weren't seeing the same things in slow logs. We weren't seeing things in the same way that we normally do because it was quite a different type of failure. And I'd say just because it's quite unique, it might take a little bit longer to fully understand it. And I think we should try to avoid jumping to conclusions. I mean, I think there's been some great work done today, but, it does seem to be a fairly unique situation that caused this. And I think we should also really understand why it happened.
I saw Nick last night in Slack, I think, running query plans against different, or generating query plans against different timestamps, and they're all turning out differently. And like, oh, this is interesting. And agree. I woke up this morning to lots of good work, mostly correlative. So more work to do to figure out that causation, and we shouldn't jump to conclusions. Absolutely agree with that. So thanks to both of you and Amy.
Before I hand this over to another section, Igor, you had some notes there as well. Do you want to verbalize any of that?
No, I think it's been pretty much covered. I'm good. Thanks.
Great. Sid, you have point C.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say I love the ideas for testing a rollback and staging, for not running the post-deployment migrations immediately after in production. Give it some time, make sure that it's stable before we do that, and the idea of speeding up the rollback so that they take shorter than an hour. Great ideas.
Thank you. And I'll link in here as well. We have a dashboard which gives us some visibility of this. So I'll add the link there so that people can also see a little bit more about what we're doing with rollbacks.
Amy. Do we have any other questions?
I'll just do a quick announcement that we did have some confusion in the scheduling of the reliability and security stand-up today. But just so that everyone knows, we will be having, for those of you that attend the daily stand-up, we will have it. It will be 45 minutes from now at 5 p.m. UTC, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So apologies for the confusion on that, but it'll be in 45 minutes for those of you that join that. Oh, and thanks for hosting today, Maren.
Thanks everyone for the great questions. I want to do a final call. Does anyone have any other questions that popped up in the meantime?
I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who worked on that incident yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it was one of the most attended incidents since we had a database issue a couple of years ago. I think I counted at some point 45 or 50 people in the call, and I'm sure everyone was helping in a certain way. So thanks everyone. I am supporting Igor's. Thank you. And Amy just linked the dashboard if you're curious about the rollbacks, so you can check that out offline. All right, thanks everyone for your time, and hope you have a great rest of the day.